welcome there. The BJP has released its election manifesto. It was signed off on the 26th of March and it's been released on the 7th of April, on the day the elections have started. Now, that itself is causing some consternation and inviting some critical feedback, but we'll talk about that a little later. It's a very long document. It's about 42 pages. Very, very comprehensive, covers a lot of issues. Let's understand what are the key issues at stake in this manifesto. I'm joined by Kumar Ketkar, senior journalist, and also Mohandas Pai from the Manipal group in Bangalore, who promises to address some of the economic issues that the BJP manifesto raises or doesn't raise. Thank you both for joining. Let me begin with you, Kumar. The larger picture, what's your takeaway? I mean, what's the spirit that you've
Well, actually, it's a very clever manifesto in the sense that it is trying to be inclusive and trying to tell the world that we are not really as conservative, as non-inclusive, a kind of exclusive Hindu group. In fact, except for the Ram Mandir and Common Civil Code, they have kept away from the conventional Hindu agenda. But conventional Hindu agenda is never really written in the manifestos.
Right.
It is implemented. Like they say, within the constitutional framework, they will solve the Ram Mandir issue. But they did not solve, or so-called solve, the Ram Mandir issue. They did not bother about constitutionality when they demolished. And now with the sting that is available, and Mr. Mutalik has completely endorsed whatever there is in that sting, saying that we actually planned a demolition. So that was not constitutional. Right. So those who did not believe in constitution in 1992, I cannot suddenly start imagining that they have found love, new love for the constitution. So, but that will never be part of manifesto. So when they say we will implement constitutionally the Ram Mandir affair, I think I would rather not trust them.
Okay. So on that issue, you're
on that. But otherwise the economic issues and the political issues, they have been by and large trying to accommodate the liberal intellectual elite because they were always afraid. In fact, the BJP suffered always from a kind of a complex that they are not accepted by the liberal elite in the country.
Yes.
And so now they have tried to accommodate them by incorporating certain issues, particularly on the economic front and even political front, like these 100 cities and all that, that we should be supported by not only the corporate groups, but even the non-corporate centrist groups. That's the effort.
Right. So, and 100 cities is interesting. That's almost a straight China lift.
Yeah.
And very ambitious if done.
Without, of course, providing from where we'll get the money. And the simple point is there are already 100 cities in the country who are not being managed.
Correct.
Like Mumbai or Bhopal. I mean, parts of the cities are in their states.
Yes.
And yet they are not managed. Nobody can say Ahmedabad is the best city.
Yes.
Nobody can say Bhopal is the best city. And nobody certainly can say Mumbai and Delhi are the best cities. So why don't they say that the cities which exist are in terrible shape, that we will, have them properly stay. That they don't say. They say creation of 100 cities.
Okay. Mohan, what's your takeaway from what you've seen in the BJP manifesto in its entirety and specifically some of the points that you've noticed?
Well, I think it's a manifesto based upon a set of principles. They elucidated principles across many chapters, and there is not much of political rhetoric. Like Kumar said, they've spoken about the Ram Mandir temple, yes, they've spoken about 370 and Jammu and Kashmir. I guess they have to cater to the constituency, but it's a very forward-looking manifesto, very different from what they have done. It's obvious that Modi's backroom boys have had a hand in shaping this manifesto.
When you say forward-looking, Mohan, can you give us an example?
The forward-looking in the sense he speaks about for industry in terms of removing the last mile bottlenecks that we have in this country and for society as a whole, and says that they will tackle the problem of labs without scientists and scientists without labs. They'll tackle the problem of teachers without school, and all the last minute glitches that we have is the way for business to focus on doing business instead of getting stuck with regulations. Start a committee to remove outdated regulations and reform regulations. Start a group to make sure that all the regulatory regimes in existence in this country are much more business friendly, and make the tax process much more simplistic. This is in contradiction to the Congress manifesto, which speaks about a right for everything under the sun and the law to make all these rights justiciable. So I think they got a very refreshing set of principles that they're bringing forth. And of course, the idea about 100 new cities, though I wish they focus on the 100 old cities, because all cities are in bad shape. And setting up new cities without doing something for the old cities means for the next 25, 30 years, we're not going to see any benefit. As far as business is concerned, I think overall, They speak about growth. They speak about easing the way for business, developing entrepreneurship, and according high priority to manufacturing, because they realize that manufacturing is a place for producing jobs, which incidentally the Congress also does. So I would say that it's very refreshing and different. If you see the last manifesto, the last manifesto that you saw was a list of litany of things to do without the principles behind it. Now they're laying out very broad principles and statements. For example, take steps for interest rate rationalization and clear policy to remove uncertainty and create investor confidence. Removing red tapeism in approvals. So these are principles. So they come out with direct policies and things that have to be done. So I think it's pretty good. Overall, much more forward-looking, much more relevant to the current times that we are in.
Right, Mohan. So if we were to look at some of the earlier manifestos, let's say the previous elections, and some of the promises that were made in the business context, since you would be familiar with that, how would you say some of these promises have either been worked upon or even delivered?
Well, I think the promises they made in the earlier manifesto, I remember the 1999, I think, manifesto where the NDA government came into being. They spoke about focusing on growth, removing red tape, spoke about large investments that they're going to make, spoke about linking India together. So many of those things have come into play. But let's remember one thing, it's okay to write a manifesto, and when you start running the government, actually, you understand what are the real issues. The real issues in government are not about the points that you make in a manifesto. The real issues are the nitty-gritties of how to get things done and what needs to be done in terms of a very big vision. So I think to that extent, from the litany of things that they did in the earlier manifesto, this is a much better one.
Okay, Kumar, litany of points. We have no guarantee that there is execution capability for anyone in general, and let's talk about the BJP in specific. So in a 42-page or 42+ page document, there are a lot of things which are actually pretty far-fetched and far out in time and space both. What is the guarantee? I mean, what can a voter or what can we go with that will tell us that this can be done, or some of it can be done?
Actually, one can be sympathetic to the manifesto even of BJP.
It's a challenger's manifesto.
After all, this is the statement of intentions.
Correct.
And statement of intentions cannot be really brought into practice, which is known as political action and the political compulsions. Now we don't know what kind of government is going to be. Is it 272 plus BJP alone or 272 plus NDA? And if it is NDA, whether it is dependent on the regional parties or it is 272 without the bringing in Jayalalitha, Mamata and Mayawati. So that makes a total difference, because finally political compromise with the manifesto will be essential with talking with Jayalalitha, Mamata or Mayawati or whoever they associate with. And that point there will be those compulsions, because they too have their perspective, they too have their manifestos, they too have their constituencies. So all the small or big parties which associate with them will have to accommodate or telescope their manifestos into this manifesto. So the implementation becomes quite awry, and therefore I think the first challenge will be a formation of government, and after formation of government,
merging
creating a common minimum program. I mean, this manifesto does not say that there is likelihood of a coalition, and in coalition we will create a common minimum program. So that even mention is not there, because it is presuming that we will come on our own with the existing NDA alliance. Then the second point is, BJP consists of, I would say, 3 layers of political people and 3 layers of those people who are actually practicing politics on behalf of BJP. The first layer of the BJP, which is the RSS, which has a completely conservative agenda, and to satisfy those conservative sections, they have incorporated the Ram Mandir, Article 370 and Common Civil Code. But while trying to tell them that, well, we have accommodated you, but actual program is that so-called forward-looking program, which Mohan correctly said, is about the economic. So that conservative lobby is one lobby. Second lobby, which Modi has consistently promoted, particularly in the last 3-4 years, is what you can call the corporate business sector. Now, corporate business sector does not have, and doesn't bother whether there is 370 or 470 or 570. They are not concerned. They are concerned with dividends, they are concerned with profits, they are concerned with investment, and in that they have smartly avoided the contradiction which they suffer from by saying that we welcome FDI, but we do not want FDI in retail. Now, FDI in retail had become such an ideological issue unnecessarily, but it had become multi-brand retail. Multiple, and therefore that retail trade in FDI they don't want, but everything FDI want. The vibrant Gujarat campaign, which Modi tom-toms so much about, actually incorporated FDI including in retail. Now suddenly I think because of some pressure from the local corporate sector, Indian corporate sector, which wants to enter in retail and does not want competition with the international players, I think they have incorporated that we will not do it. I don't think it's any altruistic motive behind that.
Okay, so but earlier it was also about states, right? Each state could take its own call, and
That was the Congress concession given to the states.
yeah.
But they mentioned that we are not against. And even on 370 they say we are going to discuss, but our intention is to abrogate it.
right. So Mohan, let's pick up the point about resistance to FDI and multi-brand retail. Now, it's otherwise the manifesto seems pretty inviting. It says come in infrastructure, come in sectors of defense, come in all other parts of manufacturing and so on, but don't come in multi-brand retail. Now, this can be taken both ways. It can be, one is to say that okay, here is a clarity of thought and clarity of positioning, so therefore there is no doubt about what is allowed and what is not. The other is that, as Kumar also pointed out, they've either developed cold feet or they are trying to obviously assuage some retail players in this country, and obviously there aren't too many to go around.
Well, I would say they're playing to their core constituency of all shopkeepers and traders, because remember where the party came from, and they had to play safe because there's, I think, a feeling of great anger. Though I don't understand why, because between the Ambani and in retail and a Walmart, I think Walmart will be kinder to us, and Walmart will be more amenable to follow the law rather than a bigger Indian industrialist who knows how to manipulate laws and process and all this kind of stuff. So instead of protecting consumers from the onslaught of organized retail, which would be the real fear, they're trying to protect the small shopkeepers, who in any case, the Indian branch retailers will aim to finish. So I don't understand the logic, but I guess it's political for them and they're doing it. But I want to point out one thing, Govind, and that is the BJP manifesto does not give numbers. The Congress says that we're going to have 10 crore jobs and 10 crore skills in 5 years. And then they say you'll take 3 years to improve growth up to 8%. They accept that the economy is in very, very bad shape. So the Congress is saying we'll spend 3% on health. The BJP does not give numbers in many of their policies. They set out principles. So they got an escape route perfectly laid out, not to get committed to numbers, whereas the Congress has stuck his neck out with a lot of numbers. So I think it's a pretty smart thing that the BJP has done in terms of laying out numbers. But I find another couple of things which are very interesting. The first is the BJP says the growth is going to come from states. I think that's a very important point they're trying to make, to say the states are going to be the engine of growth, not the government of India. And the government of India must make sure that they empower the states to do work, because the states are closer to people. So we are going away from fiscal centralization to decentralization, which I think is a real issue in this country at this point of time, because our fiscal architecture and the governance architecture is based upon the conditions of 1950, when the constitution is made, which conditions don't exist today. The second is the focus on law and justice. They said they'll double the number of judges and courts in 5 years' time. And I think it's a very important point that they're trying to make, to say that we don't have judicial capacity and we'll deliver justice fast, because the core of all the trouble in this country lies in the fact that we have a broken down justice system. We're not able to give justice to people for 2 or 3 years. So crooks and smugglers who become MLAs and political leaders, the thugs and murderers who go kill people who are not brought to justice, the riots that go on and people are not brought to justice, if we're able to improve the core system, 40 to 50% challenge society faces goes away. I think they're focusing on that. So overall, I think as far as the broad focus is concerned, is much more inclusive, much more to take people along, much more broad-based, much more a set of broad principles without very much details, but a refreshing departure from what they used to do much earlier.
Right. So let's take a couple of questions and tweets that are coming in. And Kumar, let me begin with you, then I'll come to Mohan. So one is the timing of the manifesto, which I said I'll talk about earlier. So Bhairavi Jani tweets to us saying that the timing of the manifesto is deeply disturbing. Votes for BJP from voting done today should not be counted. So obviously she's upset with the fact that...
I think that's a procedural point, and that's a very valid point that she has raised, or whoever she or he has raised. But the question is that it is not the timing alone. Why the delay was there? The delay was there because of the sharp ideological divisions that BJP is suffering from.
Correct.
On the one hand, there are the strong religious fundamentalists who are part of the RSS, and then there are strong corporate fundamentalists who are associating with Modi along with the foreign investment lobbies, and therefore to accommodate the economic right-wing agenda with the kind of right-wing conservative agenda is extremely
But why are
difficult.
the two in opposition?
But why? It is always there. I mean, it is not necessary that the right-wing economic agenda should match with the right-wing conservative religious
I'm saying,
fundamentalist
I'm not
agenda.
seeing too many points of divergence. Maybe
No, there
except
are
for one or
many.
two.
There are many. For instance, the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, which is a part run by Mr. S. Gurumurthy, who opposed Enron and every single foreign investment coming in, till 1998-99, there was a big conflict. In fact, the Coca-Cola trucks were burnt on the border of Mumbai and Gujarat. Enron was opposed. Why they were opposed? Because they did not fit into the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. But after they came to power in 1999, they liberalized so much that Ramakrishna Hegde, who was Commerce Minister, who said that we have liberalized more as if we invented the liberalization. So that was a kind of an argument. So they changed from the manifesto of 1999 or the policies, let us say, of 1999 and began to say that India is shining in 2003 because of the foreign exchange reserves and because of the foreign investment. So whatever they said has less trust value. That's why I said, and on that I slightly differ with Mohan, it is a very clever and very smart manifesto, but that does not necessarily make it a forward looking statement. It is a forward looking statement because it is only smart, it is clever. It does not specify exactly how and from where the finance will come for those 100 cities without providing finance for the existing cities which are declining and actually collapsing completely.
As an example,
as
amongst
an
the many
example.
other things that
among
will
many
take
other
a lot of
things.
money.
Like on health they have said, 78% and all that they have mentioned, but from where health is a very, I mean, health became the most contentious issue even in the country like United States. Health was the contentious issue in the United States, and to say that in India we will provide healthcare for all without saying how and which kind of multinationals or local companies, they have said Ayurveda and homeopathy and Unani and everything will be accommodated, but I think it's too vague a statement to accommodate and pretend that we are inclusive.
So, Mohan, I know that your position is that vision statement, project the larger picture. What Kumar is saying is that that's good, but then the specifics or the lack of specifics in sometimes at some points betray a certain sense of purpose and or rather the lack of purpose in the whole document.
Well, he has a good point because like he said, the BJP is going through a process of change. With many people who are born possibly after independence now coming to power, getting away from their past based upon religion, division, etc., to coming to a much more nationalistic modern India. So I think there is a process of change, a new generation is coming through. And they understand very well that the great majority of voters are young, they want jobs, they want development, they don't want the old hatred, etc. They also need to move away from the kalank they have. Kalank in the sense, the black spots they have about the Babri Masjid, about the riots and all that, and move to becoming a much more modern rightist party, which is fiscally conservative. They also understand they have to become much more socially liberal because the young people are very socially liberal, and young people are not going to vote for a party which is stuck in the past and which talks about dressing for women or conduct for school children or conduct for young people in colleges. That's not going to happen. So we are seeing them in the throes of a change. And I think it's very interesting that the change will go on. So yes, people who have prior memory, people who seen the party grow will say, yes, don't trust them fully because they're trying to change and the things are there. But it's all right. See, I'm emboldened by the fact that we are a country based upon the rule of law with a written constitution. So secularism and communism in this country are not a gift of any political party. It is a right of every citizen on the constitution of this country. It's guaranteed to all of us. Whether a BJP comes or a Congress comes, our rights to freedom of religion, to freedom of movement is guaranteed and nobody can take it away. And after the Supreme Court decision on the basic structure of the constitution, it's very difficult for anybody to come even if the 400-seat majority change the constitution. Yes, they could engineer rights, social trouble and all that. But with the media there, with the justice, with the judges being there, with civil society, all that becomes more difficult. So I guess it is a call out for the future that I see. When Kumar has a point, yes. But
Kumar, go ahead.
No, only small point, if they are saying that the young generation is more modern and wants to be progressive, they have avoided mention of gay rights. Whereas Congress has come forward and said that we will bring about a law.
Maybe knowing that the BJP will
Yes,
be silent on it.
and that's the point. I mean, if they are not conservative, the young generation is not conservative, and I refuse to believe that entire young generation is not so conservative. You know, there is
Some
a
of it is
difference.
conservative. Yeah, it depends where you are
It
young.
depends from where you are, because there are, I mean, after all, the followers of that Mutalik were young.
Yeah.
Followers of Khap Panchayats are young. Followers of Akhilesh on the one side and followers of some Muslim fanatics are young.
Yeah.
So they are all fundamentalists in different kind of groups,
Yeah.
and they are not at all modern looking. Modern looking are those who are exposed to West, who are exposed to modern technologies, who have a facility to work from the metropolitan centers. Not just having a mobile and Android and a computer and internet and WhatsApp, it makes you modern. Modernity is not an attribute of technology.
Sure.
Modernity is an attribute of mind. It is recognizing that the world is one, world is changing, and the world recognizes humans. That is modernity. Modernity is not having an Android and sending messages which are horribly malicious and vicious.
Correct. So Kumar, let me then ask you, we've seen 3 manifestos now. We've seen the Congress, AAP, Congress, and now the BJP. If I were to ask you to compare them thematically, right, how would you, how and where would you rank who?
I would not rank, because fundamentally they are parallel to each other. So I would not like to rank.
Sure.
But everybody has tried to cover and obfuscate both. Cover the follies in the past, cover what they ignored, and now realizing with the challenge came from the so-called right wing to the centrist Congress party, the challenge used to come from the left wing. Now therefore earlier there would be mention of workers' rights. Now workers' rights don't exist anywhere.
Correct.
I mean, trade unions are considered as supposed to be gone under new so-called labor reforms. So when you say labor reforms, what do you mean by labor reforms? Without taking into account the rights of the trade unions, without taking into account the rights of the workers, because the current mythology is that the growth and development model recognizes investment and dividend, does not recognize the justice to the workers, and justice to the landless laborers. About 60% people depend on agricultural laborers, and they demand workers' rights, human rights.
Yeah. Okay, good. So there are a lot of questions coming in now. So let's begin with a few. Does the Ram temple overshadow BJP's development plank? Is one. If it is all about Vikas as they claim. Second one, would it have been better had the manifesto clearly defined? Let's pick up this one. Would it have been better if the manifesto defined its priorities with specific timelines? Venkateshwara R asked, and that would have brought about greater clarity. Mohan, do you want to go on that first?
Well, I think they have not defined timelines. They have not given much of number. They only elicited principles, because I guess they know the economic situation and how difficult it's going to take this country around. The Congress accepts that it's going to take 3 years to bring back growth to 8%. And that, I think, is a fair assessment. And if it's going to take you 3 years and you've got a 5-year term, obviously if you set very high targets for yourself and give numbers, you're going to be stuck. So they have taken the very clever way out of having broad-based principles and making sure that they can blame the Congress in the case they don't achieve much, saying that they inherited a very, very bad economy. So to an extent, they're not given numbers. I think they've been very clever and pretty smart.
Yeah.
Getting.
So because some of this one, I mean, we all know that this is like a 10 to 15-year plan. I mean, you may start on it, or you may initiate it today, but there's no way a lot of this, particularly to do with infrastructure, cities, health, can get done in 5 years.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, because whatever you start will be done later. For example, the Golden Quadrilateral took 10 years.
Yeah.
The first 3, nothing much happened. The impact was felt in 2005, 2009, right? So all these are long-term measures, but the movement will be pretty good if they start this movement. See, Govind, what India needs today is much more opening up. What India needs today is much more economic freedom for people to act and behave. What India needs today is much more forward-looking regulations which protect consumers, at the same time create an open architecture. If any government is willing to provide that, then I think India will grow by itself.
Right. Okay, so let's come back to the Ram temple overshadowing the BJP development plank, Kumar. So your point earlier was that the Ram temple is basically taking care of a certain constituency within the overall corporate hierarchy of the BJP. My question is, how important is that? I mean, to someone who's watching this, who is a little younger perhaps, and they may not understand, right? So when a BJP document says Ram Temple shall be in the constitutional context or within the framework of the law be implemented, is all of BJP going to sit and focus on that when if they come into power?
I don't
Some of it, and things like that. I mean, all the issues which are somewhat concerning. How much of the overall bandwidth is it likely to?
No. Actually, if you ask me, by knowing personally many of the BJP leaders in the state as well as in the center, actually most of them do not want Ram Temple on the agenda at all.
Okay.
Most of them have understood the vanity and redundancy of the Ram Temple project. But at the same time, you must recognize in all parties, there is always a fringe lunatic group which actually drives the mainstream. It is not the mainstream, always in the world, it is not the mainstream which impresses upon the fringe lunatic groups. Fringe lunatic groups highlight certain points and the mainstream actually follows them. And therefore, Ram Temple actually in the minds of the BJP leadership is not the main issue to overshadow other points, but the fringe lunatics will force them. And therefore, it will be very difficult for these people who have actually risen from the grave, as it were, literally from the grave of the Babri Masjid to this stage. I think it will be very difficult for them to convince them, well, that is not the issue, basic issue is development. They are not governed by development and growth. They are governed by dresses, women's and men dresses, and gay sex or not, then live-in relationships or not. All these issues, majority of the BJP leadership today also has conservative viewpoints.
Okay, but you're saying that this is not something that's going to occupy, and this is only going to occupy the minds of those few people who will
drive the mainstream. That's my fear.
Yeah. Okay, so you've left a fear on the table. Okay, so there's another question. Let me come to you, Mohan, on this. Matang asks, Modi has been talking of skill development, but BJP Manifesto has nothing new to offer. Are you also happy with the education agenda of the BJP?
Well, they promised that they'll set up a group to come out with recommendations to have a new educational policy in 2 years, etc. But I am personally disappointed because everything that has to be said about education has already been said in the last 67 years. In 1948, the Radhakrishnan Commission spoke about reforms in education, which is the same point today, and that is the lack of autonomy for our universities. The only way to get better quality is to make our universities autonomous and give them some decent funding. No amount of commissions, no amount of committees can do anything unless you do this basic thing. It is all well known. So I'm disappointed in setting up another commission. They're going to have a policy after 2 years, all that rubbish. So I don't think it's an education. I think is very poorly thought out and very, very poorly done. So I think they just have some buddhijeevis from Delhi who are writing some stuff just for the sake of stuff.
Okay.
And offer new education degenerates into rewriting history books. To suit certain conservative agenda. That's a danger in the so-called education reform.
So actually, I was interested, Kumar, now that you mention it, the manifesto begins with history. Right? It takes you back to several thousand years before the Christian era, the Vedas, Upanishads. It talks about the failure to capitalize on inner vitality and the nation's intrinsic strength and so on. Is that a good thing, or does that
I think it is irrelevant, not a question of good or bad. Nobody is challenging the greatness of India in the past. Nobody is challenging the greatness of India in the ancient.
I want to remind you that...
what is the case of, what do you mean by reminding? Gandhiji knew it. Pandit Nehru writes in his autobiography about the great civilization. The question is, if you had such great civilization which you had, why did it disappear? And then you accuse Mughals and British and everybody and then Congress. Then why such a great civilization failed to such small fries? Why should Congress demolish the 5,000-year-old civilization? Why should British and why should Mughals, demolish the 5,000-year glorious civilization of knowledge and good societies? So I think that's only this Ramrajya business. I think it's acutely reactionary in the conservative sense of the word. That does not mean that whatever was in the past was bad. But point is, why did you not have it? Why you had to suffer such aggressions, which you call aggressions? And why did you suffer? And then you accuse Congress. Congress never debunked all the civilization that we had. During Congress time, the Ramayana and Mahabharata serials were, when it was totally non-private television, government television, Ramayana and Mahabharata were screened. So they respected all that. So I think this is complete nonsense of, kind of reviving. That is the revivalist sentiment still prevailing in the BJP. From those who are coming from the RSS background, they are not concerned with the corporate development of the country. They are not interested in jobs as such. They would, of course, like to have jobs. They are interested in having, virtually like Iranian fundamentalists having mosques rather than projects, industrial projects.
Okay, good. So, Mohan, let me come back to you. I don't know if you want to respond on that point. I mean, it just struck me as quaint, perhaps, if nothing else, that there was all this reference to history and really distant history at the beginning of the manifesto. Another quick question. Should the Venkata Krishnan asked, should the manifesto have defined what is going to be done about manufacturing sector, both revival and growth? I mean, there is a mention, but is that sufficient, or is there anything more in that to give us a sense that manufacturing will go from 0% growth to, or industrial growth will go from 0% growth to something else?
Well, let me answer that issue what Kumar said. I think there's a lot of mumbo jumbo in the BJP about the past. It's all mumbo jumbo. It has no relevance. It may make some people feel good, but the great majority of people, it makes no difference. If India was a great 5,000 years ago, why are we so poor today and so terrible today? So I think we should bother about today. So I think I would tend to ignore all that mumbo jumbo. Like Kumar said, is catering to certain very reactionary parts of the party. Now, as far as manufacturing is concerned, I find a very important point that the manifesto has made, and that is to incentivize and focus on labor-intensive industry. I think for the first time I'm seeing a focus on labor-intensive industry to create greater employment, rather incentivizing capital. I would have thought that with all the big capitalists in the BJP giving them money and support, there will be talk about incentivizing capital-intensive industry. But funnily upon, when they talk about industry, they're talking about manufacturing, incentivizing labor-intensive industry. I think that's the place where we have gone wrong, because electronic assembly, the garment industry or the textile industry and the tourism industry are extremely labor-intensive. They created the great majority of jobs in China, and that's what I think they need to do, and that I'm very happy. And as far as other manufacturing is concerned, they're going to make India a manufacturing hub and all the nice words. In manufacturing, about a clear tax policy, giving rebates for exports and everything else. So I said, wait, I mean, Govind, there's all a statement of intent, what they've been saying in the past. The nice thing to do, it lacks details. It lacks details in specific programs, like I said earlier.
Right. One more feedback point. Chinu says BJP manifesto is pretty vague on detail and blank on processes, looks more like grandstanding. So this is a statement. Let's not go too much into it. Let's head to some kind of conclusion now, and let's do that by looking at the two manifestos that have come earlier, the third one that we have in front of us. Elections has begun today. What do we make of these three manifestos, and what do we judge in terms of what the parties who are standing for elections actually intend to do or can do if they were to come into power? Kumar?
Well, minus the mumbo jumbo of Indian civilization on the one hand and Ram Temple on the other, by and large I would say all three manifestos are clear on one thing, that they want to erase the feeling among the people that the political class is all corrupt and useless and not interested in the nation building at all. That feeling, if that existed and exists, then that feeling from all three manifestos will help disappear. Okay. Because minus these mumbo jumbos, even BJP manifesto concentrates on economic growth, on development, on nation building. So does Congress, though it gives more figures and it tries to obfuscate the failures in the past. And so does AAP, bringing in some kind of ethical dimension to the political practice. So I think together, if you put them together and remove the contours of those absurdities, then I think by and large they provide optimistic scenario after 2014.
And the other important question, and let me ask this to Mohan first and then I'll come back to you. Mohan, so are you getting a sense, or are we getting a sense that the whole nature of discourse as gleaned from these manifestos has moved a step ahead or to the next level?
Well, I would say, Govind, my personal view is that Congress has moved back into a much more socialist, rigid structure compared to the BJP, which has gone forward giving a set of principles.
Right.
Let me just explain why it is. I'm very concerned about intergenerational equity. Now, the part of the food security bill, they bound the people of this country to the food security bill for the next 30, 40 years. Now they're saying they're going to have a law for right to health, right to pension, right to housing, right to social security, right to dignity and human condition, right to entrepreneurship. I don't know what the right to entrepreneurship is there. Right to food, right to information, right to employment, right to fight corruption, right to identity, right to direct receipts, right to this, right to that. That means they're passing all kind of laws in parliament, knowing the laws cannot be enforced with at a huge amount of cost, binding future generations after 67 years of freedom. For 67 years, they never gave us a right to health or whatever it is. Now they're giving it and binding the future. I don't think the young people of this country want to be bound by something which is taking them to the past. So I think it's a very dangerous socialist kind of view, which is based upon antiquated thinking, which is there only in some little parts of the world. So I think it's a pretty dangerous kind of a manifesto because they're not forward-looking and very detailed. So I think if you look at all manifestos, the AAP is a statement of good intent. Yes, they're new. The Congress is very, very detailed based upon a rights-based approach, which I think is not very good for the country at this point of time, considering where we are, and is going to hurt us more. The BJP is a set of principles which shows the conflict between their past and their future to be much more open. So I think they're very different manifestos that we have.
Right. Okay. Kumar, last word.
Somebody might say Congress is giving a rightist tilt by giving all those rights to the people, right to information, right to job, etc.
And no, because the last, really, I'm saying the final conclusive question is really, what are the people taking away from all of this?
I think people are taking away both, and I would not run down the Congress manifesto as socialist, and putting together words socialist and dangerous as if they are synonymous. I think I would not appreciate that, because I think the socialism of Congress so far has been Fabian version, which emphasizes concern for the people and concern for the poor more than the socialistic practice in trying to nationalize the means of production. So I think that kind of socialism Congress has not practiced, and Congress doesn't want to practice. It doesn't say that also. So what is dangerous and socialist is not exactly in that sense, but Congress is highlighting the issues of the people which bother them, rather than only bothering issues about the economy, which are also worth handling for development of the economy. So BJP is highlighting the aspects of development and growth of economy, and Congress is highlighting the so-called rights or the justice to the people, justice to the poor and justice to the people. I think combined, they don't make exactly a negative, and certainly I don't think
I think the fear in Congress, the fear about Congress is that they are concerned about inclusion, whichever way you define it, and it's quite a stretchable definition, and will provide inclusion without taking care of the supply side, which is a strong economy and good growth and so on.
No, I don't think they have ignored the aspects of strong economy.
No, I think the track record is what.
Track record, but emphasis, but actually speaking, Govind, the Sensex, when Manmohan Singh took over in 2004, was around 6,000. And today Sensex is 22,000. I mean, even if you forget the rush by the FIs in last 6 months, even then it was 18,000. So there cannot be 18,000 from 6,000 to 18,000 Sensex rise without having some positive aspects of economy. The number of cars a family had in the middle class and the higher middle class in 2004 was perhaps one or no car. And today the entire middle class, despite petrol price rise, is having tons of cars. I mean, every family has
things have improved. I don't think there's
things have improved. Which means that they have done something. What we are complaining is that they have not done enough.
So I don't meet the aspirations.
Correct. So they have not brought the aspirational class on board, and which I think the BJP is highlighting. So the Congress failure is BJP's gain, and BJP's obfuscation is Congress gain.
That's an interesting note to end on. Well, there you have the tale of the manifestos. The debates here at the India Hangout, of course, continue. We'll be back. Thanks to Mohan and Kumar for joining. Bye.